Right now, in our backyards, a public health disaster is brewing. The largest saltwater lake in the Western Hemisphere, resting at the bottom of a terminal basin in Utah, is in critical danger as we speak. During the past decade, the lake has seen rapid decline and dangerously low levels. This is dangerous because, being a terminal basin, the lake collects harmful materials that embed themselves into the lake bed. While these toxic materials remain in the water, lower levels allow these materials to escape into the atmosphere and into our lungs via dust storm events. Scientists have warned us for years about the negative effects this dust will have on the general population of Utah, but local leaders refuse to listen. They acknowledge that the lake is in critical condition and even speak frequently on how large the impact is on the rest of us, but their reckless legislation is only killing the lake faster. When legislation comes about that is actually supposed to benefit the lake, they refuse to actually vote for it. Just the other day, they approved the construction of a massive 40,000-acre data center in Box Elder County that is supposed to use almost 3 times the amount of energy than the rest of the state does. And they didn't even allow public comment at either sessions. The truth is, the people in office are afraid of the general public, and they will use whatever tactics possible to silence the voices of the people. It has become increasingly obvious that the government is actively doing anything they can to silence us. Are we going to let them? Are we going to let them? The Great Salt Lake is the home of a unique, tight-knit ecosystem that is full of small arthropods, migratory birds from all around the planet, and fascinating plants adapted to life in the unusually saline body of water. Many of these migratory birds' global populations are directly related to the size of the Great Salt Lake, like the Wilson's phalarope, a bird that breeds in the western United States and Canada in the late spring and early summer and migrates to southern Argentina for the winter, primarily touching ground at saline lakes. Since the lake's peak in the 1980s, the bird's population has declined by 70%, and a recent petition seeks to list the species as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. Black terns were historically known to be found in colonies nesting on marsh floating 1 or 2 inches above the water, and though they still migrate and stop at the lake during their migration, they no longer breed at the lake. Bank swallows are adorable little birds who have a rapidly declining population in North America, making the lake's preservation instrumental to these birds' preservation. All of these birds come to the lake to feast on the brine shrimp and the brine flies, little arthropods adapted to the lake's extreme saltiness. These animals don't have the voices to speak for themselves, the voices to speak up for their own lives, so who will speak for them? Not only is the local wildlife hurt by the decline of the delicate ecosystem, but the local towns and cities will be severely affected as well. We've seen the story again and again at several saline basins. At Lake Ermia in Iran, Salton Sea and Owens Lake, both in California, communities surrounding dry saline lake beds have seen increased rates in respiratory and cardiovascular disease like asthma, and have reported poor air quality that is physically painful to breathe in. A lot of these diseases came from exposure to the dust that is embedded into the lake bed. When lake levels recede and the wind picks up, the dust is carried through surrounding communities, often manifesting as large dust storms. This dust often consists of carcinogens like fertilizers and pesticides, and the Great Salt Lake's dust has been shown to contain heavy metals such as arsenic and uranium. Do Utahns really want to be constantly exposed to these elements? Why are these materials here in the first place? How did we get here? What can we learn from other communities who have suffered before us? The Salton Sea is a lake in Southern California with an incredibly fascinating history of drying up and reforming several times over thousands of years. In 1900, Governor James Budd approved construction of the Alamo Canal, which relocated water from the Colorado River to the Salton Sink, a dry lake bed that rested in San Diego County for agricultural purposes. In 1905, heavy snow and rainfall caused the Colorado River to swell and engulf part of the Alamo Canal through breaches constructed without the Mexican government's knowledge. Flow from the breaches would eventually cease, but the town of Salton and the Torres Martinez Desert Cahuilla Indian Reservation were submerged. The lake should have died out naturally, though uphill farms utilized the not-so-water-wise flood irrigation technique to water their crops. The excessive runoff would keep the lake filled for many years, though the water was kind of unsafe due to it being pumped full of fertilizer, pesticides. Communities would begin to pop up around the lake, and soon the Salton Sea, particularly Bombay Beach, would become a booming tourist destination for outdoor recreational activities such as boating and fishing. Celebrities such as the Beach Boys, Frank Sinatra, Jerry Lewis, Bing Crosby, Desi Arnaz, and the Marx Brothers were known to frequent the lively clubs and luxury resorts, and a 1951 regatta boasted 21 world records. Unfortunately, the fun wouldn't last long, and in the 1970s, animals began to experience mass die-offs. These die-offs occurred due to the high levels of salinity and high levels of agricultural chemicals pumped into the lake. The large amount of fertilizer would cause severe algae and bacterial blooms. Botulism spread among the fish, and birds were attracted to the sluggish and sickly fish. And in 4 months alone in 1996, 15,000 birds dropped dead from sea avian botulism. Biologist Ken Strum recalls having to incinerate bird corpses for 24 hours a day because of how many there were. Though Congress and President Bill Clinton signed the Salton Sea Reclamation Act of 1998, the lake levels would decline drastically due to more efficient irrigation methods being introduced to the surrounding areas. Nowadays, the predominantly low-income indigenous and Hispanic communities of the area are paying the price of this reckless experiment's downfall. Children are especially sensitive to the heavy drought and frequent death storms, and 20 to 24% of children living on the south end of the Salton Sea have been diagnosed with asthma. This is double the national average, which is 11.3%. In the summer months, the lake emits a foul sulfuric smell that is physically painful to breathe in. Inhalation of the dust can cause allergic reactions and nosebleeds. What was once a booming lakeside city is now a struggling community who faces the adverse effects of reckless water usage. A statement that is eerily prophetic to northern Utah's current situation. Only our lake is about 3 times bigger than the Salton Sea ever was. This isn't even the only time in the last century this has happened. In the early 1900s, government agents posed as rural farmers to secure the necessary land rights to build an aqueduct from Owens Lake in Inyo County to the rapidly growing metropolis down south known as Los Angeles. The lake began to shrink in 1930 after every single one of its inflows were rerouted to Los Angeles, and by 1926 it was completely dry. The local agriculture-based communities struggled because the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, or the LADWP, had bought up all the land in the area and there was no water to go around. The lakebed would become the largest hotspot for dust in the entire country, and the lake remains dry unless there's heavy rainstorms. The LADWP has already poured $2.5 billion tax dollars into dust mitigation prior to 2014, including adding gravel, vegetation, tilling, and mild flooding to the lakebed. But in 2024, unusually heavy rainstorms caused the lake to expand tenfold and destroyed dust mitigation efforts almost immediately. In March of 2023, a series of atmospheric rivers ruptured the aqueduct and caked the equipment in hypersaline muck, requiring the removal of an estimated 300,000 cubic yards of debris and silt from roadways and spreading grounds. This all came as a result of a sudden wet year after years of severe drought and wildfires in the Sierra Nevadas, which hadn't seen a thick snowpack in years. These wildfires are largely fueled by invasive plants that were introduced to California by settlers, which are not drought tolerant and incredibly sensitive to heat, which makes them a danger to the ecosystem. This all goes to show that our infrastructure is not equipped for the erratic weather conditions that come as a result of climate change. The fact that such a little lake can become the biggest hotspot of dust in the entire country is incredibly concerning, because the lakebed in our backyards is 8 to 15 times bigger than that lake. After hearing stories like this from our own country and watching our legislators attempt to solve this crisis, it's hard to imagine much of a future in Utah. Averting the collapse of the largest saline lake in the Western Hemisphere is not something we can take our time on. Like Governor Cox himself said,
I'm so tired of our country taking years to get stuff done. It's the dumbest thing ever. We think that taking time makes things better or safer. It absolutely does not. You get a chance to give your feedback and then decisions get made.
So why do we refuse to give any of our own money to the lake? Why do we have to beg the president for money or take donations from philanthropists? Right now, our government's priorities are in the Olympics. In fact, Governor Cox's GSL 2034 charter seeks to restore the lake before the Olympics come. If we want to make sure our state is appetizing for tourists who are coming here to ski, why don't we give them a healthy snowpack? Why don't we ease up on our water diversion so we can experience the lake effect again? The sad truth is many of these politicians are not voting for the people, but only for their wallets. Governor Cox is a proud farmer of mostly alfalfa, a crop that requires a hefty amount of water, and the majority of it is exported out of the state and even out of the country. This crop also takes up half of Utah's total water consumption. Just last month, Cox signed HB 222 into law, which prohibits civil liberty or criminal liability for climate-related harm brought on by greenhouse gas emissions. He also signed into law HB 60, which eases up restrictions on water developments as well as limiting our rights to protest and sue the corporations behind these developments. These effectively bar environmental organizations from holding corporations accountable for the damages they inflict on their local communities. He also signed SB 225, which allows the Utah Inland Port Authority to use more than 200,000 gallons of water every single day in their facilities along the Great Salt Lake Basin. The list goes on, and these are only the bills that harm the lake directly. Our state has some of the most lenient environmental regulations in the entire world, and our government bows down to the mineral and oil industries. We have the world's deepest open pit mine and the world's biggest man-made excavation in the Bingham mine owned by Rio Tinto. And they're trying to build the world's biggest AI data center in Box Elder County. When legislation comes about that seeks to improve the health of the lake, it rarely gets enacted. I personally worked with Senator Nate Bluin to write and try to pass SB 250, a bill that seeks to relocate $200 million donated by philanthropists from the Water Infrastructure Restricted Account, a collection of government money dedicated to diverting water from the Great Salt Lake, to an account that appropriately uses the money to restore the lake. Several people, myself included, showed up to speak in favor of the bill. In fact, the first time the bill was heard, they restricted the public comment and had attendees sit in an overflow room because so many people showed up to speak in favor of it. That's how packed the session was, which is incredibly uncommon for environmental hearings of this kind. Many legislators even spoke positively of it, but they refused to vote.
I have a motion, and then I'd like to explain the motion, if that's okay, Chair. My motion is to table this bill at this time. I'd like to
You
speak
want
to
to speak to that?
Yes. This is a really good bill, a good concept. I love the innovation and the comments. I don't think there's any disagreement in what we're trying to do.
I'd like to make a brief comment. I really do commend all the folks who came and spoke in support of the bill today. I would encourage you all to keep engaging, keeping an eye on bills that are being discussed and spoken about here at the legislature. We need your constant attention. We need your voices so that we can keep bringing this forward. Now, where this bill has been held in Natural Resources Senate Committee, there's not a lot we can do at this moment. You know, if the bill does come back onto the agenda, you know, I really would love to be able to have more discussion. I love the creativeness of constituents bringing this solution, and I just want us to keep pushing on it. So thank you for everyone taking the time to come speak today.
I think we've had a great discussion. I appreciate the folks that have come and testified. The bill has been held in the Senate committee. I would encourage the good senator to continue to work with that Senate committee, and maybe something will come of it. I make a motion, we move on to the next item.
Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
When people went out to speak against the massive AI data center proposed in Box Elder County, the council refused public comment and even walked into another room because they refused to hear what the people had to say, and they voted unanimously in favor of it. Unfortunately, sometimes the bad guys do win. However, Mother Nature always wins in the end. Humanity always pays for their crimes against the earth, and in this case, we'll likely have to pay with our lungs and our access to clean